Hi everyone, welcome back. Speed drawing this time. I'll be talking over the top of it just to tell you what I'm doing as we're going along. Basically it's a A4 sheet of paper and I'm just starting off doing the line drawing. It's going to be a fairly simple landscape, bridge on the left hand side, trees and buildings middle distance, and then a big expanse of water in the foreground. I'm only using two pencils for this, by the way. I'm only using a 2H and a 2B. I'm just keeping it nice and simple today. Just takes a bit of time just to get the line drawing in place, just to work out the proportions and everything. I've got another video on this actually, so you could go and watch that if you wanted to work out how to lay out a drawing. As you can see, I use set squares, a bit controversial, but you know my feelings on those. Yeah, it's hard to actually see at the moment what's going on, because it's only a 2H pencil I'm starting off with. I usually start off nice and light. I don't like too much of a strong line usually in my drawings when I start, because as I progress through the picture I like to lose the line completely and just use the tones to separate the objects instead of everything being outlined, you know, like pen and wash or something like that. Now you can start to see a little bit more of what's going on here, some of the buildings in the background. You can sort of see the roofs there and a few of the trees around it. I'm just roughly trying to work out where the bridge is going to go. Not easy things to draw actually, bridges at angles with the arches and everything. It's quite tricky to get them looking right. Just takes a bit of practice, that's all. Well, a bit of practice in a set square anyway, that's my excuse. And if you do struggle at the line drawing stage and you're looking at your drawing and something just doesn't look quite right, you can't really tell what it is, might be one or two things even, the best thing to do is to turn your picture upside down, and your brain registers it differently. It doesn't see it as a picture, it just sees it as a load of lines, and the perspective lines that will be out in your picture will really stand out when the picture's upside down, so you can go and correct them. Another good tip, it's very similar. You go and hold the picture in front of a mirror and you stand at the back and look at the picture in the mirror, so it's like a reverse image, and again your brain doesn't register that it's a drawing that you've just been doing, and it sees a completely different image, and anything that's wrong, you know, any perspective lines or horizon lines or anything that aren't straight will really stand out. So you know, it's quite easy to notice them, and you know, just as easy to go and correct them. Anyway, as you can see, I've just started drawing in the tree there, very simply, sort of putting a mid-tone in, blended it in a little bit, and pulling a few highlights with the pencil eraser. You've seen me do this in a previous video, where I actually used graphite powder to do a very similar thing. Okay, the video's sort of skipping along a bit there. I had to record this in 15-minute sections actually, so there's 3.5 hours of real-time video all recorded in 15-minute sections, and I've sped it all up to, I think it's 8 times its normal speed, 8 times faster than its normal speed, and it's condensed it down to about 25 minutes. So I'm just putting in the roofs there, I'm just blending in some of the pencil lines. Still keeping everything, fairly light and mid-tone-ish, because I'll go back in later and darken everything off and pull highlights out and things like that. When I use graphite, I do tend to work differently than I do with coloured pencils, or if I'm using watercolour and graphitin pencils over the top. I do tend to sort of go in, add a little bit of shade and detail, whereas with watercolour I just sort of block in the shapes first, and then the detail goes on afterwards. But sometimes with a pencil drawing, once you've got that line drawing established, you can just start with the detail, especially on things like trees and things like the foliage. So I'm just putting in this tree in the middle here, sort of middle distance tree. Just using the side of the pencil there just to kind of loosely, block in that kind of mid-tone. And then I've gone back in again with the HB pencil now, just adding some of the darker areas at the bottom there where it's in shade. And just blending them back in. Don't want anything too hard edged at this stage. Alright, so I'm just defining the edge of the bridge there along the top. But again, I don't like, hard lines in a drawing. I'll lose those towards the end. I'll blend all those into the surrounding areas so we don't actually see a line or an outline on anything. I see a lot of sort of amateur artists do that. Everything sort of seems to be outlined, and then they sort of colour in the middle and they still leave like a darker outline around the edge. If you lose the dark outlines and you just use the tones of what the objects actually are to define the shapes, you'll get a much more natural appearance, a much more realistic look about it. But if you're going for that kind of pen and wash look where everything is outlined, I mean obviously leave the outline in, but if you're going for a more realistic approach, I always try to lose the line, lose the outline. I'm just drawing in the archways now. Although it's sped up, I'm really taking my time here because I'm having to think about this. I've got a photo of what I'm drawing at the side of me. I should have actually included it at the start so you could have seen what I was using as a reference picture. It's not actually a photo, it's an old watercolour painting that I'd done quite a while ago, and it didn't turn out right, but I like the scene, so I thought, well, I'll have another go at it in graphite. But I'm constantly looking at the reference picture as I'm drawing. My eyes keep flicking from one to the other so I can get the shapes right. And there does come a point in your picture, particularly towards the end actually, where you've copied your reference photo as best you can, it's all looking good, and it's time to stop looking. There becomes a time when it's a good time to stop looking at that reference photo and only look at your picture, your drawing, and think, what can I do to my drawing, to this drawing? Literally get rid of the reference picture, just do not look at it at all, and just look at your picture in its own right, because it doesn't have to be an exact copy of the reference photo. As long as everything's in proportion and the correct perspective and everything. You know, we've got artistic license to soften things off even more in the background and sharpen things up more in the foreground. You know, to give you greater distance in the picture, although it might not be there in the reference picture. It can be nice to you know, use your artistic license and do those kind of things in your own drawings. Just adding some more detail to the bridge now. Still using a 2H pencil there and just blending that in. Just trying to get more of a 3D appearance there. Now the favourite bit, shading in the darks under the archways of the bridge there. And always remember as well, at the top of the archway underneath the bridge, it's always the darkest because the light doesn't catch it there. And as the archway comes down towards the water, it gets gradually lighter because the light will reflect off the water and catch the sides of the, well, the underneath of the bridge there, the sides. And obviously more light is going to hit it there as well. As you can see, I'm taking my time here. I must admit I'm not the fastest drawer in the world. I'm pretty slow and I do like to take my time. But for me, you know, it's all part of the enjoyment. Sometimes it does seem a little bit like hard work when you get a drawing that's sort of going on for 8 hours or so. But usually, I mean, I like to make them last. It's all fun for me. I enjoy every minute of it usually. You know, but I understand that you don't want to see sort of 3 to 5 hours worth of me drawing, so that's why I've sped the video up. It's a new format that I'm trying actually, you know, speed drawings with a voiceover. So I'll just see what comments I get, see if people like them. I know a lot of people prefer real time, but it's like I say, 3 hours, 5 hours of real time, it's just not practical really. Right, I'm just drawing in some of the distant buildings there, some of the rooftops and the chimneys. Now that one there that I'm drawing is just slightly set further back than the other ones, so I don't want that to be you know, too dark, too hard edged or too detailed. I want it to be softer than the ones that are in front, sorry, yes, softer than the ones that are in front of it. The ones that are in front of it will have more detail, you know, more established tones and everything, to make them sort of pop forward a little bit more in the drawing. You know, it's a good way of getting distance in your drawings, you know, to make your backgrounds softer and lighter, more blended in than the foregrounds. It gives that sense of distance. You know, even if in the reference photo that this building M might have well appeared exactly the same as the ones in the front of it, but it's going back to what I was saying before about artistic license. You know, we can soften these things off, you know, to give us greater distance. You know, so don't be afraid to deviate from your reference photos and you know, try new things. I mean, if you do soften a background off and it doesn't look right, you can always go back over it again. You know, it's only graphite. We can keep reworking it and erasing it until we're absolutely satisfied. Same again with these distant trees there. You can see me softening those back. Still a little bit too dark. But like I say, you know, I have got the option of softening them off and lightening them up later on in the picture. I'm just drawing this second roof in now, just establishing the roof line again in the ridge tiles. Just sort of shading it in and adding, you know, bits of detail just to suggest the roof tiles as I go along. Now I'm using, this is a Pentel mechanical pencil. It's got a 0.3mm lead in it. It's very, very, very fine. It's excellent for doing really nice sharp detail, like for these, you know, very small windows, for getting in the little corners there and getting them filled in nice and level. Whereas a 2mm, you know, wood case pencil on a drawing of this scale for doing things like that could actually be a little bit too thick. So these 0.3 and 0.5mm mechanical pencils are a must-have really when you're working on a small scale like A4 or A5, you know, and you've got a lot of small detail in there. Again, I'm just drawing in a few roof tiles there. Well, just suggesting them actually, I'm not sort of drawing them all in. Just tidying up around the windows a little bit, keeping everything nice and level. Just soften them off with the kneadable eraser. That just looks a little bit too dark. Just darkening off under the roof there. Now putting some shade there underneath the eaves. Just going over the top of the windows as well. You probably smudge out some of your window panes when you're doing that shading under the eaves, but don't worry about that. We can always go back in and darken them up again. It's one of the perils really of graphite drawing. When you're blending things in, you know, you often have to go back in again just to establish the tones, because you can obviously wipe some of the graphite away and lose the tone, although it's nice and soft. But it's just something you have to compensate for when you're drawing. Putting in these overhanging bushes now that just hang over this wall. Same method, sort of just little squiggles with the pencil, sometimes on the side, sometimes with the point. And then I go in and soften them with the blender and pull a few highlights out with the pencil eraser. Softening along that wall there now, some of the hard edges there. I'd be absolutely lost without a blending stump when I'm drawing. As you can see, I've got several different sizes of them. I like the very small ones for getting in there and getting the fine detail and the fine lines nicely blended, and obviously the larger ones for larger areas. And anything up to a folded kitchen towel for blending in large areas like skies or large foregrounds and things like that. It's part of my drawing style really, blending and softening off. It's the look that I like with graphite, you know, nice and soft, and the focal point, you know, fairly sharp and slightly darker or lighter than the surrounding areas. Like in this picture, it's obviously the bridge that's the focal point. Although it's a fairly bad composition actually, it should be more in the middle where that tree is, but you know, to be like in the golden ratio of the thirds when you split your page into thirds. But you know, we can't always get these perfect compositions. Sometimes we have to sort of bend the rules a little bit because this is what the scene looks like. So I mean, I could have probably put a boat there or something going on in the water, you know, right in the hot spot, right in the golden ratio on the third section there. That would have really added a nice focal point to it. But I've just kept it fairly simple. It's just just water and reflections really that's going to be in the foreground. Just starting with a few of the reflections now, some of the darks under the bridges there, just establishing where they are, just getting the dimensions right. I'll obviously be going back in later and doing them in a lot darker than that. But it's just a long drawn out process, no pun intended. It is a drawn out process, literally. It's a labour of love really, you just have to take your time. Observation is key. Just keep looking at that reference photo, just keep checking and double checking that you've got the proportions right, you've got the perspective right, and then start establishing the tones and just gradually work forward through that process, and you'll soon start to get really good results. It all starts just with a simple line drawing. It's the foundation of your drawing, but it has to be fairly accurate to start with, or everything else that you put on top of it, it's not going to improve it, it's just always going to look wrong. So get that line drawing as good as you can possibly make it. And it was like I was saying in a previous video as well about only working with 3 tones, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. The white of the paper is the lightest tone, and then I use a 2H pencil, which is the medium tone, excuse me, and then an HB pencil, which is going to be my darkest tone. I could actually go a lot darker, but if you press down a little bit harder with an HB pencil, you can achieve some pretty dark tones. But if you just work with those 3 basic tones, by the time you've blended things in and pulled a few highlights out and everything, all the other tones in between just take care of themselves. It looks like you've got far more than 3 tones going on. You've got quite a few, 8 or 10 or 12, many more than that even. Excuse me. So you can actually keep it simple. You don't need these massive selections of pencils. I mean, I'm guilty of that. I buy the full sets of 24. Well, I used to buy the full sets of 24. I only kind of buy them in sets of 12 or 6 now, or just individually, if I run out of one. And generally what I use for all my pencil drawings now is 2H is the lightest, then I use an HB, and then sometimes a 2B, a 4B, and either a 6B or an 8B, and that's it, And as you can see now, I'm literally drawing with the blending stump, which has got graphite already on the end of it. Now I'm using a bit of kitchen towel just to kind of blend over the tones that I put in for the reflections there, just to soften everything back. I'm going in with the kneadable eraser there, just pulling out a few highlights, and back in with the pencil, just establishing a few darks at the side of it and blending them in. This is getting to the final stages now where that's part of the course now. Just keep highlighting and blending, and just keep refining and adding the darker tones and pulling the highlights, and just keep casting your eye over the picture and just seeing what needs doing, and just keep asking yourself, would it look better if I'd done this or I'd done that? And I know a lot of paintings and everything can be ruined, preceded by those words, but when it comes to graphite drawing, it's like I say, we've got a lot of scope for correction. We can repair things quite easily by erasing them and blending them and going back in with darker tones. So I'm just sort of pulling a few highlights on the water now with a kneadable eraser, just to more or less establish what's being reflected above it. You know, the light areas there, I'm just kind of pulling them out now with the eraser there, and then afterwards I'll probably go back in with a pencil and, you know, darken up around it, you know, to emphasise it a bit more. But just keep working at it and adding that detail. You know, and as you can see now, I'm going in with a fine pencil, just bringing out those reflections and little highlights in the water. You know, it's just at the stage now where basically it's just polishing, just refining, just adding the little touches here and there. You know, any blending that needs doing, and there we go, there's the finished drawing. So I hope you like that. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.